So what is this API for everything? So basically, whenever you build a website or build an application, the first and foremost thing is that you have to have a connection between the front end and back end, and that is provided by the API. So the back end contains all of our business logic, and the front end connects to the API via these endpoints. The problem is that whenever the user interacts onto the application, the endpoint depends upon how the user interacts. So the user has to interact a certain way before the front end hits that endpoint. So this is something which is hard coded, because it's always going to be that the user will fill a certain form, and the user will click on certain button or click on some certain element, and the certain API will hit. So this is something where the user has to interact a lot with the front end. So this is something that I just feel is inconvenient for a user. So what we can do is we can just simply let's say ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is something which is very convenient and a very nice option for us, because we don't want to go on to Google search and then search for something and then click on some link and then find out and then read out everything that is over there. So whatever information we want, ChatGPT gives us then and there itself. So what enables the ChatGPT is the LLM that they have built upon. So we will be also using an LLM, but the problem is that these LLMs are not real time. They don't have data of the current situation, and they don't have data of even of, let's say, past 2 months or 3 months or anything of that sort. So we just don't want that. We want the LLM and these real-time APIs of different kinds to work together, so that we can get real-time data along with LLM, and the user can actually put any prompt in it, and the user can actually get any data with just by just writing a simple prompt. So I'll just explain the architecture of how we will be doing that. So firstly, let's say we have okay, so this is our, let's say, front end, or yeah, so this is our front end, and we have uh, we have different APIs that are used to get data from to send data to the front end, that is to the client. So let's say we have an API one. So there are these APIs, and there are many of them. So what we are trying to do is, from the same prompt, a user can get access to news, user can get access to finance, user can get access to, let's say, anything, let's say sports data. The user can get access to any real-time data that fluctuates every day. So that is something that we want to do. So there are different APIs. Let's say you have some news API, then you have some API that gets the finance data, latest financial data. Then you have some API that gets you the latest sports news or latest sports scores or anything that is going on with sports. So there are these different APIs that the front end will be interacting with from a single unit. We'll just put prompt, and this prompt will straight away hit onto this API. So we need to develop something in this space that will identify which API to hit to, and will hit the API as well and get the response according to what the user wants. So for that, what we can do basically is, obviously whatever application we'll be building, will have our own API as well. So this API will enable us to, let's say, it will enable us to connect to the LLM. So okay, so let's see where the LLM sits in this architecture. So if you look at this, the first thing, whenever the user is going to send a prompt in the form of text, so we need to understand that text, parse that text, and then go and send the request to a certain API, whichever we want to. So in a large use case, what we can do is, these APIs will be stored in a database. So in this, let's say we have a database as well. Okay, so this is a database that consists of all the data of all these APIs. So it will contain the API endpoint. It will contain all the request parameters that this API takes, and many different things, like and along with that, it will also be having the function of what this API does. So according to this, we will be identifying which API we have to hit to. So this, all of this will be present in the database. Now the first thing that will be done is whenever the user sends a request that consists of a prompt, so firstly we will have to have something that will understand that prompt and get the type of function that we want from an API. So okay, so I'll just write these steps over here. So the first step would be to understand the user prompt and uh, identify the, let's say first we will have to identify the topic with which the prompt is dealing with. Let's say if it's news, then we'll have to deal only with the news API, because we don't want a lot of things to be coming from the DB. We cannot, there will be thousands of APIs in a larger scalable scenario. If we talk about a scalable scenario, there will be thousands of APIs that will be put onto the database, and we don't just want all of these 1,000 APIs to come onto our server and then we identify which of them to use. So we just want a very small amount of them. So basically what we will be doing is we will assign a topic to these API endpoints in the database. So let's say if it's about news, then the topic would be news. Let's not topic, or maybe category or whatever field that we'll be putting up. So it will be news or finance or sports or arithmetic operations or anything. So first what we will have to do is understand the user prompt and identify the category category it belongs to. Okay, so this is the first step that we'll be doing. The next step that the API will do is, now once we get the topic, get all API endpoints along with their functions, along with their function descriptions. So function descriptions would be the description of the API. I mean, whatever the API does, that will be described in the database. So get all API endpoints along with their function descriptions from the database. So let's say in the first step, our API identifies that it's a news thing, something the user wants to have something about news. So if the category it belongs to is identified as news, the next step that we can do is get all API endpoints that are related to news. Now once we get all the API endpoints related to news, we will send the prompt, the user prompt again, the user prompt and and an array of API endpoints back to the LLM again, and the LLM will now identify which API endpoint will suit the user prompt that has been obtained. So this is our step 3. So in the step 3, what we'll be doing is first we need to convert. Okay, so we will send send the API endpoints array as well as the user prompt to the user prompt to the LLM. Now the LLM will identify which API to hit, and also get the get the get the request parameters from the user prompt itself. So we'll have to identify the request parameters from the user prompt. So let's say if it's news, sometimes it will be a case that we need to have a date, the date, time, and the country that somebody is living in. So all of these things are also required. Maybe we can use some geolocation API in the front end that will enable us to fetch the latitude, longitude, and then we can fetch the location of that certain latitude, longitude. But currently we'll not go into that complexity. We'll simply we'll simply add everything in the prompt. So let's say if you want news from India, so it will be like we'll be giving a prompt like give me some top headlines of this date, in India. So and the API will figure out what is the country as a we will have to send country as a request parameter. Then the API itself will identify the date is also given in the user prompt. So we'll be working in that way currently. But if in case there is no date and time and place not mentioned by the user, in that case we'll have to use some geolocation API or something that will identify all of these things. So that can also be done, but currently we'll not get into that complexity as of now. So LLM will identify which API to hit and also get the request parameters. Then will construct the API endpoint string and use fetch API or Axios to hit onto it. Once the response is obtained, send the response object to the LLM ask for uh, and ask for it to convert it into a readable human format, and this send the response back to the user, that is the frontend. Fine. So these are the three APIs that we'll be working with initially. In string manipulation, we'll be having very simple functions, and okay, so this is how we'll be working. These will be the three different APIs, and our aim is for the LLM to identify which API or which topic it has to hit to. Now the thing is that whenever we create a news API, there will be whenever we deal with any third-party API, we'll have a API key that we will be using. So for that, what we can do is we will also have something like, okay, so what we have done is get all API endpoints along with the function in the database, send the API endpoints array as well as the user prompt to LLM along with the API keys that are API keys in the environment variables. So in generally the API keys that we use are stored as environment variables. So whenever we send the API endpoints array and the user prompt to the LLM, along with that we also send the API key and ask the LLM to identify which API it has to hit to. Along with that, also use the API key that you want to use. That's it. So this is something that we're going to do, and we also don't want any. We also don't want the LLM to hit onto some API which is not available. I mean, if it does not have an API in the database, then it should not be sending any latest data to the front end. So I guess that can be taken care of anyways. So what we basically have to figure out, the first and foremost, is to we set the LLM up and set this API up to hit onto the accurate API on this side. So let's do something. Let's first create the backend API. So let's create new directory. Start coding here. I have already made three different prompts and the responses of these prompts. So one prompt which I had given is check if the string is a palindrome. So yeah, ABBA is a palindrome and the response that it returns is true. Then if you go to arithmetic prompt, then add 45 and 67, it will give a valid 112 response. And for news as well, if I just give a prompt, tell me the top headlines. Once I give this prompt, the only fact that it is not working well here is that the query parameter it assigns is on its own. So this is something that we don't want. We want to have our own query parameters. So for that we can obviously change the prompt and improve the prompt so that the query parameters that are being set are correct and to the point as we require. So currently the entire thing is working. What was more important is that the approach that we are trying to build here. The approach is that there is an LLM over an API that we are building. So this LLM will undergo the entire API will undergo these 7 steps, and the LLM can determine onto which API it has to hit. So what it will do for us is that it will provide us with the option of getting real-time data to an LLM. So the LLM basically will only have data up to a point where it has been trained. So that creates a limitation for LLMs. But if we can do this, we can integrate multiple APIs into a single LLM. Then we can obviously the user in the front end can get the real-time data and also get insights on that data from the LLM itself if the LLM is trained to do some certain sort of work. So yeah, that will create a difference. So this is the approach this is just an approach to what we can do. And yeah, so that's it from my side. Thank you so much.